Well, thank you, everybody. So great to have you here today. I'm Leslie Burkus, Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society, and you're here for our monthly learning series. And to make sure we have plenty of time to hear from Stephen Eister, I'm going to jump right in and share a little bit more about our association and society. So again, an introduction to UCFS, and then a presentation from Stephen Eister with City of Tampa, Florida. If you're not from the U.S., Florida is called the Sunshine State, so hence the name. Florida's laws are not always sunny. And he's going to talk about some unintended impacts when state laws impact municipalities. I've been hearing about this periodically. Maybe you're experiencing this in your home state, where cities will pass laws and then states pass laws that supersede what the cities are doing. And of course, that's something that we're really concerned about and thinking about. How do we make sure that cities can really put impactful ordinances and policies in place? But what happens when, again, state law might supersede that? Stephen will be talking about that in this presentation. He'll talk about how urban forestry and arboriculture professionals can provide some input, because when they started, they weren't able to, and then some ethical dilemmas that can come up when these laws go into place, and then time for Q&A. We really want to thank our members and sponsors for making this type of thing possible. If you are a member of UCFS, we really thank you for that. You are who make this possible. Our sponsors make this possible. If you're not a member, really hope that you'll join when the time's right. For those here today, please drop your name and where you're from in the chat. It's so great to see everybody and reconnect and see where everyone's from. So please drop that in the chat. We'd love to connect that way. This webinar is being recorded and I will share it afterwards. It is approved for one ISA CEU, and at the end of the webinar, I will drop the form in the chat for you to be able to fill out your ISA CEU information. Then we will submit that on your behalf. And then you are all are on mute. At the end, I can bring you off mute for any questions. And then during the time, use the chat for any questions or to communicate with one another. If you're new here and you are not familiar with the Urban and Community Forestry Society, we are the professional membership home for folks who make daily tree care decisions. And really our goal is to help you build the confidence, competence, and camaraderie of all professionals who manage trees and forests to create and sustain more livable communities. And breaking that down further, it's just what I said. The members of UCFS are the professionals who are charged with making a daily tree care decision. You are charged with deciding where and when trees go in the ground, and you are who are going to make us meet our big tree planting goals across the country and world. And we really want to make sure you feel confident in those decisions and help you connect with others who are doing that same work. It can certainly be lonely, and we don't want you to feel lonely in that work. We want you to feel connected with others who are doing the same thing. If you are not a member, or if you are, hopefully you're taking advantage of everything that we have to offer. We have our City Trees publication that is coming out bi-monthly and is focused on making sure that you have both technical skills and personal interest stories and hearing from others who are doing the work across the globe. Our Arborist Exchange program helps pay for members to visit other communities and see urban forestry in action. And I'll go through a few more. Here's the Arborist Exchange. Again, this would help members be able to pay for their travel to go see urban forestry in action. We just had someone from Ohio visit Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have someone from the Chicago area going to be visiting Portland. We do a lot of these exchanges, so we really would welcome you to take advantage of that. Our UCFS accreditation program focuses on your community. How do you prove to your constituents? How do you prove to your city council? Maybe how do you get in a little competition with your neighbors to say, we are the best. We have really met the standards to say that we have a top-notch urban forestry program. And this program is getting a few more tweaks, but will be rolled out in the next few months, and encourage you to keep an eye on that and see if it's right to kind of make sure that your community is standing out as a star. In terms of that networking and making sure you're feeling connected with folks, we have our conference coming up in Chicago on November 18th and 19th. If you haven't been to the Windy City for a while, November's the perfect time to come visit Chicago. So please make sure to join us for that. Again, there's nothing like being with your people in person. It is rejuvenating. You learn a lot while you're there. Registration will open on July 30th, and we hope to see you there. If you're not familiar with our Municipal Forestry Institute, this will also be opening on August 1st. This is the leadership training program for urban foresters. Not proper arboriculture, not pests and diseases. How do you lead from your position? How do you feel confident in the decisions that you're making? How do you lead with a growth mindset? How do you navigate city politics? All those types of things are covered during MFI. And again, that will open on August 1st, and we'll let you know the location coming up. It'll be on the West Coast, but we're kind of teasing that as it comes along. Finally, thank you again to members. Really appreciate having you here. You are who make this possible. You are who help make sure our big tree goals happen, and we wanted to make you feel connected with others. If you're not a member, again, hope that you'll join us when the time is right. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Stephen, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. Let me get my screen shared. All right, let me know if you guys can see it.
We can see it.
All right. So hello, everybody. So today, kind of like Leslie mentioned, we're going to talk about the impacts of state laws on local ordinances. So Leslie actually approached me about this back when I was at MFI this year. She asked me if I would come on, and I think she read an article about it. And she asked me if I could give some firsthand experience of what we've been dealing with down here in Florida. This is some background on myself. So my name is Stephen. I have a degree from environmental policy from the University of South Florida. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm an urban planner too at the city of Tampa. Prior to that, I was a forester examiner, and then I was a landscape examiner prior to that, and then I did environmental code enforcement. So I've been through a bunch of different kinds of positions that deal with municipal forestry. I'm a certified arborist. I'm also track qualified. I'm an MFI 2024 graduate. And then I'm also certified as a code enforcement officer here in the state of Florida. So we're going to get right into it. So the history of this law, it was originally sponsored by a representative, Mike LaRosa, and co-sponsored by the other representative, Anthony Sabatini. It went through passed both Senate and House, and then it was signed into law by the governor in June 26, 2019. So almost, was that 5 years ago now? And it went into effect in July 1st, 2019. This law actually was proposed the year prior in 2018 independently, and it was not passed. It failed. So when the law came into effect this time, it was actually presented as part of this, as a little piece in a large transportation bill that got passed. So, it's kind of hard when, politicians slip little things in here or there. So this is the original state law that came back in July 1st of 2019. And I'll just read through it real quick. House Bill 1159 prohibits a local government from requiring a notice, application, approval, permit fee, or mitigation for the pruning, trimming, or removal of a tree on residential property if the tree presents a danger to persons or property as documented by a certified arborist or licensed landscape architect. A local government may not require a property owner to replant a tree that has been pruned, trimmed, or removed in accordance with the bill provisions. The bill does not apply to mangrove trees, which the trimming and alteration is also regulated statewide by the Department of Environmental Protection. So as you guys read through the law, you can see it really only pertains to local ordinances. The statewide, like mangrove trimming ordinances and things like that, were excluded from the bill altogether. Somebody submitted some questions to Leslie and she sent them over to me. So I wanted to put them right here because this is kind of right where they fit. And it's like, did legislators contact the ISA or any other arboriculture industries for input? At this point, no. This law was not passed with either ISA or local, like, municipalities input. And then did this come from people hating costly / excessive rules or misunderstanding of rules? Yes. So the bill was originally put together by a developer who received a large fine for illegal tree removal for a subdivision. And then, as you guys know, Florida, is kind of the Wild West sometimes. It gets a little crazy out here. So we try to hold on to the trees when we can, you know. So when this law came into effect, it made it pretty difficult for us. And from a municipal standpoint, you know, Florida's biggest attraction usually is the sunshine, the weather, tourism. And when people think Florida, they think, you know, typically palm trees, you know, vegetation. That's what they come here for. So this law was kind of counterintuitive to that, and it raised a lot of issues. So why does this matter? And did it really impact that much of Florida? So if you guys look at this chart below, the bottom bar is the size of the city. The top bar is percentages of tree ordinances. So as you guys can see, the larger cities in 2014, you know, you look at 250,000 to 500,000 people, 73% of cities in Florida with that size population had tree ordinances. And then, you know, as the cities get bigger, so did the amount of tree protection ordinance put in place. So this kind of just gives you a effect. It didn't impact one or two municipalities or one or two counties. It affected a large majority of the state. So this is kind of just a quick breakdown of the different ordinances that were regulated through this. So as you see, you know, regulation of removal of dead and diseased trees, you know, a lot of municipalities, like you guys know, we regulate that because of a life safety issue, not as much as a mitigation or thing like that. But the big sections were the required preservation of trees during development and required trees be planting in new developments. So when this law came into effect, a lot of people were concerned that trees would not be going back and that there would be a large reduction in canopy, especially on different types of residential properties, which I'm going to show you some cases that we've had throughout the state of Florida. So, you know, in Florida too, we don't require licensure for tree care companies. For a lot of places, few counties do. I worked in Hillsborough County, the city of Tampa, Plant City, and then I'm originally from Lee County. And out of those 4 counties, which are larger counties within Florida, none of them require licensure for tree services or certifications. Give you guys a few seconds to look at those graphs, and I'll have the link to these articles. Once we finish up the webinar, I'll send these slides to Leslie if anybody wants them, or you guys can reach out to me directly if you guys want to see these slides. Yeah, Scott, I see some of the comments in there. Florida is heavily developer influenced. So that's where some of these laws come into effect. And then we're just going to continue on. This is the last chart, I promise. I'm not a huge chart guy. I'm more of like a let's see the cases guys, but the numbers speak to it, you know. And again, it just kind of shows, this breaks it down by the community size again. And so this is the community size here, 2.5 to 4.9. And then it goes up. And as you guys can see, if you look at the larger municipalities, 82%, 64% require plantings in new developments, 6% for new parking areas, 27% on restricted cutting on private properties. And that's what caused a lot of these rifts, is it applies to private properties that people are owning. I know a lot of states don't really even regulate private property trees. Florida, we do. But as you can see, in larger cities, 27% of them regulate private property trees. So that kind of just gives you guys a quick little background on how impactful this vague law really was and what it did. So the law left, kind of like how you guys heard me kind of allude to, left many unknowns for us. What is dangerous? What is residential property? What is documentation? I don't know how how many of you guys are ISA certified or track qualified, but dangerous does not pop up in our glossaries for the ISA. So when a law uses terms that are outside the industry standards, it creates a lot of issues. And then what is residential property? You know, we are, from a municipal standpoint, we probably have a far greater understanding of that compared to, say, somebody who operates a tree service, because we deal with that day to day. And then what is documentation? So the definition of dangerous from Webster's dictionary is involving possible injury, pain, harm, or loss, characterized by danger or a dangerous job, able to likely inflict injury or harm. So when we use Webster's dictionary, it comes up to we have two questions that come to my mind immediately. Is first, is it dangerous if the property is vacant? You know, because we're always educated that, you know, the target makes the risk. So if there's no target, is a tree on vacant property dangerous? And when I'm posing these questions, you guys are welcome to like put answers in the chat. I like people to be involved as I'm presenting. And then the second question is, can you ever eliminate all the danger of a tree? You know, trees are not stagnant creatures, you know, they're living organisms. You know, we can assess a tree and then, you know, a month later a limb breaks that we missed, you know, because of a bad connection or a freak storm. So is it, you know, can you ever eliminate all the danger? You know, a 3-foot tall tree could poke somebody in the eye, you know? So there's always a danger element. And that really caused a lot of issues for municipalities, for arborists, and it just created a lot of tension. So what is residential property? Alan, I just saw you ask this, and we're gonna cover this as we go through the PowerPoint, but this is just some questions I want you guys to think of. Mobile home parks, RV parks, HOA properties, right-of-ways. The last one, we should all probably be pretty familiar with here. You know, right-of-ways are typically not owned by property owners. They're typically owned and maintained by the municipality they're located in. And that was one of the very first stipulations that came out, that, you know, if a tree is removed in a right-of-way, it was not that person's tree to remove. So that was a nice clear-cut answer from this law. At least we could establish, like, hey, right-of-way tree removal, you're going to receive a violation. End of story. And that made it very simple for us, at least from the municipality standpoint. And then what is documentation? So, you know, these are some options that people were actually using under this state law. So a track report, you know, a track report is kind of the industry standard for a risk assessment, but not the industry standard for what we would consider a dangerous tree. So the track report, in my opinion, identifies a risk and a mitigation option. This dangerous tree report, you know, it doesn't really fit in. So Scott, to clarify, for right-of-way trees weren't impacted by this law. So we could do whatever type of enforcement that was applicable. So say if you were required 2 street trees and you removed a tree illegally, you would still get charged the additional permit fees. You would still have to replace the trees and go from there. And Dan, exactly. And that's the risk. That's what we came into, is the difference between dangerous not being defined and what's the overall risk and the threshold of the person who owns the tree. So this is kind of where we got stuck in the middle, if we got contacted at all. But back to what is documented, like we were getting notes on napkins that had addresses with bad, dangerous tree at this address. And, you know, we would show up, we would do an evaluation, and then they were holding this like piece of napkin that they just probably got out of their truck with a Sharpie and wrote down. And without the case law, you know, we had to accept that until something was verbally confirmed for us by a lawyer. Florida also has laws about verbal reports being binding. I think track even outlines verbal reports, but you know, is that officially documentation? And then lastly, we would get pictures, you know, and that's, pictures are actually at least kind of helpful. You can see the condition of the tree and the existing point of view, but we have no context to go with it. We just got dangerous and it's written across the photo. And you're like, oh, okay. That's like, thank you for at least the photo so we know where the tree was at on site. And so on. So we ran into this issue for months until, you know, because everything takes a process, you know, even, you know, I know people, the consumers get mad that government takes so long. Well, government gets mad at government sometimes for taking so long, especially in these situations where we need answers. And I'm going to show you guys some of the hallmark cases that kind of came through Florida that kind of gave us some case law to at least start basing some answers on. So eventually the city of Tampa, for that small paragraph of the law, we received a two-page memo about how we were supposed to make our determinations. And some of the issues with this is, say, the memo we received may be different from the memo a different municipality received, if they received a memo at all. So these memos were kind of a good tool for us to start with, but it left us still, you know, it still left an inconsistency across the board. So the first major case that came through us, and you guys can Google this too, it's an interesting situation. We call it the Gandy tree removal case. It took place within days of the law officially going into effect. It was the removal of 29 trees within a mobile home park. So if you guys look at it, this is the aerial of the original violation before the trees were removed. As you can see, as you guys can see, the mobile home park was pretty covered in canopy. And they actually tried to go through a rezoning before to do something else there. It was denied by city council due to the trees. And once this law went into effect, they considered, you know, hey, this is a mobile home park. People live here. It's residential. We're going to take these trees down. So let's hope this video plays. I'll get it playing here.
This could turn out to be a costly cut. Last month, News Channel 8 watched the tree cutters there bringing down several grand oaks in South Tampa.
Neighbors were not happy. Now the city is issuing $840,000 in fines, but some say it's too little, too late. 8 on your side's Jeff Patterson joins us live from South Tampa. Jeff.
Good evening, Stacey and Keith. This was the Life O'Reilly Mobile Home Park on Gandy Boulevard. Trees that were here for generations have been cut down.
We see it all the time where trees that are presumably healthy trees, they fall and they kill people.
In August, certified arborist Jonathan Lee ruled the oaks here were diseased. Under a new state law, if a certified arborist like Lee declares trees are diseased, they can be cut down in residential areas.
It seems pretty evident to me that that is not a diseased tree that's ready to die.
Neil Sivier lives nearby and, like many, was outraged when he saw a tree company hacking down the grand oaks here.
Look at the biggest tree in the whole area appears to me to be perfectly healthy. And
this property is zoned as commercial, and because of that, the city fined the property owner and the tree company a total of $840,000 for cutting down the oaks. Tampa Mayor Jane Castor believes the fine sends a message.
It can't be looked upon as we'll just cut down the trees and consider that the cost of doing business.
Tampa City Councilman Bill Carlson believes the state law should be changed.
Really, it could result in the destruction of our tree canopy in Tampa, which makes us special among cities nationally and internationally.
An attorney for the property owner here believes that the state law preempts and prevents the city from issuing or requiring a permit. And so he says that's because people have lived here for 40 years. Obviously, it looks like this is going to court.
And I wanted to pause it right here for you guys because I want you to notice, if you look at all the mobile homes in this photo, if you guys see the orange stickers, Scott, they are all eviction notices and like letters that you have to vacate and leave. So you guys, I just wanted to get you a little cut on that. So this case, lasted until after I got hired. I got hired kind of in the middle of it. And, it brought up that question at the beginning, RV parks, even if people reside in an area, is it considered residential? And that's when they brought up the fact that this property was on commercial. So when this site, this page.
This could turn out.
So when this case went, it went to regular code board and then actually went to appeals and then civil court and then an appellate court. So this went all the way up. And Paul, I can touch on that too. Wouldn't a fake evaluation be a violation of a code of ethics? So once the violation of, say, the ethics violation actually was put on hold until this case was finalized. So it did move forward and there was an outcome. Not fully allowed to talk about it, because that's how municipalities work, but it was processed through the ISA and it was processed. So the arborist was to pay fines in amount of $243,000, which accounts for 29 trees. The highest fee we can give here in the city of Tampa is a $15,000 fine for irreparable damage. So he was charged half of that, just under half, and the developer was charged the other half. So the developer paid his portion, and then the arborist fought the case all the way up. And then the plus is, now that we had this case law established, it established that commercially ran properties do not qualify for the exemption under state laws. So this included mobile home parks, RV parks, HOA properties. So even though if you're like, say, a townhome community and the HOA owns all the surrounding property of your townhome, trees cannot be removed under this exemption through that. So it kind of at least gave us quite a bit of guidance when it comes to that. Excuse me. I got a newborn daughter or not a newborn anymore, she's a year old, who goes to daycare and brings me home every germ. I feel like I'm just getting over strep throat again. So sorry if you guys hear me coughing. So this is what the case looks like today. It's not even used as residential property anymore. It's used as a Woody's car wash. The property changed hands multiple times before the car wash bought it. The neighborhood was very adamant about the property, what was going to happen to it. I don't think they expected this would be the outcome, even after the violation and so on. So now it's a car wash. The other part of the parcel is not developed. The one cluster of trees still does remain. So this was the first major impact that we saw in the Tampa area from this new law. But we did have the benefit of, like somebody mentioned, we have a mayor who's very supportive of the tree canopy. Tampa is known as one of the nicest canopied cities in Florida. So we take a lot of pride in what we're doing. So when we have situations like this, it really puts a damper on, all the hard work we're putting in. So we're happy that the appellate court agreed with our decision and our rendering, but it doesn't put the trees back together. And I'm sure you guys know that heartbreak as much as anybody. Tree violations are a struggle for us all because you can't glue a tree back together. It's not like a building. You can rebuild a building. You can't glue together a 150-year-old live oak and put it back on site. It just doesn't work that way. And instead, we have another car wash. So this was a second case that we had. This was on a residential lot. They wanted to remove a B6 rated live oak. In the city of Tampa, we use Matheny and Clark. So we use A through F. A is like textbook, F is dead, and then you have a rating 1 through 12. So 12 is highest risk, 1 is lowest risk. So this was a healthy mid-range tree. So the removal was denied, and it required a variance. This property was owned by a corporation at the time. But after the law passed, this tree was removed. The city of Tampa lost this situation. The appellate judge stated that the property was zoned residential and was zoned for single family. Even though it was owned by a company, they could remove the tree to be able to develop the land. So now we knew, okay, we have two cases, one that defined commercial properties and one that defined, even though it's commercially owned, if the zoning is for single family, they could still utilize the law for the removal. Exactly, Alan, just like you said, due to the zoning. It was based more on zoning than anything else. So this case was Larry and Ellen Vickery this was in the city of Pensacola. This was a historical tree that was removed. It was a 61-inch live oak in the backyard. So this was another case that went through. They had a hearing, and then this was the decision made that we got from the Vickery case. So the tree was removed without penalty. The judge determined that it was the right of the homeowner to remove the tree. The judge also determined the law was not vague. He brought up the factor of, the law talks about dangerous tree versus dangerous trees. And he brought up the idea of if you're removing 6 trees, how are all 6 trees dangerous? So he brought up those questions, which was good. That question needed to be brought up. What are the chances that every tree on a site is dangerous? And then the final decision was made that municipal arborists cannot challenge private arborists in cases of dangerous tree removals when documentation has been provided. So that's kind of a hard pill to swallow when that kind of court decision is made. And I've attached the court case summary too for this, so you guys can read through it. Because sometimes a homeowner contacts a tree service, and we all hope that every tree service is as reputable as the most reputable tree service in our community. But we know that's not true. We know every community has their problem. problem tree services or problem arborists. It's, so it makes it rough when, somebody gets, scared into removing a tree that may not have to be removed. And that's kind of how we felt when this went into effect and kind of that case summary came out. So now that we went through the cases and kind of the three major ones that kind of gave us some case law to work off of, we're going to kind of talk about the impacts that it had relationship wise between municipal arborists and private arborists, communities and municipalities, etc. So it created a lot of rifts in industries. There was a lot of shifts in roles. There was rise in advocacy groups. Like somebody mentioned, there was an increase in ethics violations. So kind of the shifts in roles, as most of us know, it created almost a combative situation all the time, because it was like it drew that line. It kind of divided us by, okay, the municipality is on this side, the private industry is on this side, and now they're butting heads over this law in the middle. So a lot of arborists that say I had communication with 5, 6, 7 years, all of a sudden just drop off the face of the earth, because they're like, well, Stephen, I don't need to talk to the municipality anymore. I can just write letters. I don't need to talk to you guys. I don't need to communicate with you guys. If you guys have a problem with it, take it up with the state. And I can't tell you how many times that was what I heard when I asked somebody, even just asked them, hey, what's going on with this site? I know you guys are doing some tree preservation on it. Now the tree's gone. They're like, well, Stephen, take it up with the state. I wrote a letter. And it's like, you're like, okay, like, it's my job, it's our role to check on, like, hey, these trees are supposed to be saved. What's going on? And then that's their response, and these are the same people, you work with them all the time. So it kind of changed our role. We got pushed out of our role as kind of like an educator and a supporter, and we got moved into almost like an enforcer. And, I did code enforcement for a few years, and it specialized in tree removal violations. And, I wanted to promote and move up so I could help prevent that kind of thing. But when this law went into effect, it brought all municipal arborists out of that, where we wanted to educate and help people. Nobody wanted to communicate with us anymore. Nobody wanted to talk to us because we were the bullies, or we were trying to enforce rules when the state said no. And, it kind of severed a lot of connections. And like, it even came to the point where, you would go to meetings, like educational trainings, and, all the municipal people were sitting together, and then all the private people were sitting together. And it's like you were back in high school, and there was like a clique, it was divided in half. You had your consultants, you had your municipalities, and then you had your educators and professors. And, I never expected something like that to happen, because, we're a pretty small group of professionals anyways. There's not that many ISA certified arborists, really. I think there's maybe 9,000 to 10,000 across the US. That's not that large of a group when you consider the population here. So then when you take that and divide it into thirds, educators, and then the professionals, and then, our private, and then municipalities, you're cutting your knowledge pool, you're cutting your communication pool, and all that by 66%, because you're 33, and then the other two groups make up the other 66, so they made it very tense for a long time here, trying to figure out who you could talk to, who you could work with, what private arborists were still, trying to follow what cities have always been doing, and what arborists were really, lost my train of thought there. Sorry, guys. And what arborists were using the law with the intent it should be used. a lot of municipalities, like I know the municipality I live in, and I know the both the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County have a section in their code already. If a tree is dangerous, it can be removed without permits. And I feel like that's for a lot of municipalities. Oh, right. Give me 1 second. Who is or what entity determines whether or not documented tree risk assessments? So, JP, I'm looking at your question on who or what determines whether or not the documented tree risk assessment was formed. So we're going to talk about that. So hold your question, because that wasn't a part of the original law. So, you know, track reports are, you know, they have the BMP, they have the ANCA 300. But I'll ask all you guys ever see a BMP or a standard for a dangerous tree report? We would even use that verbiage, you know? It's not even verbiage that would ever even enter the industry. So that's kind of just some food for thought as we finish through. And then there's one more question. Was any of the tension related to the fine of the private arborist in South Tampa with 29 oaks? So Douglas, it's kind of interesting because a lot of other people, even private arborists, were shocked by that removal. It wasn't just from a city perspective. It was from, you know, a whole community perspective, because, you know, a lot of arborists actually looked at those trees. And, you know, before, when it was in for rezoning, 2 other local arborists went out and rated those trees as healthy. So, you know, when a 3rd or 4th arborist comes out finally, you know, they just went through the cycle. You know, how many arborists can I get before I get the one that's going to give me my answer? And, you know, those 3 or 4 that rated all the trees healthy, all of a sudden now this guy comes out and said, oh, these trees are dangerous. We need to cut them all down. You know, and it created a rift there too. So, you know, some of these cases did create a rift on both sides, but I'm talking from like the overall perspective, we really saw a decline in communication. And as you guys all know, working with developers, working with contractors, working with people in general, once the communication breaks down, everything follows right behind. All right.
Steven,
So,
quick time check, about 15 minutes left.
All right, I'll go. I think I'm in the lighter part of it. So what we saw in Tampa, we saw a lot of rise in advocacy groups because they didn't have to follow the same rules we had to follow. They could take whatever project they wanted. They could take whatever stance they wanted, and they weren't governed like we were. So for us, you know, we have the Tampa Tree Advocacy Group, and, you know, if you go to a Tampa hearing of any kind, they're going to be there. You know, they want to support the canopy here in Florida. They want to preserve trees. And they're going to do it however they can. And, you know, they're a great mouthpiece for the trees. So, you know, it's good when, you know, they're kind of, you know, on the preservation of tree side to kind of balance out the developer side. Like somebody mentioned before, Florida is very developer friendly. It's very developer motivated. And then these are some other groups across Florida that do tree plantings, like Tremendous Miami does a lot of tree plantings in Miami. Greenscape does plantings kind of all over. So ethics violations, this created a lot of issues, especially when the word dangerous, like I mentioned before, it was not defined. So it created a lot of issues here. And the ISA really only has standards for track reports. So when these other forms of documentation came out, or what people were calling dangerous tree letters or dangerous tree declarations, you know, it came purely down to more of an ethics violation than it came to you did not follow the proper standards, because there is no, they determined there was no standard really for these dangerous tree letters, quote unquote. So I know when this came out, I think the main office was so inundated with ethics violations because you had municipalities filing them, you had private arborists filing them for like trees they've been maintaining for 10, 15 years. All of a sudden this guy comes in from out of town and cuts the trees down. There was people who got reported for, they would start a website and it was like, you submit your photos and we'll provide you a dangerous tree letter. And like, they weren't even local. They were in Texas, California, all over the country. And they weren't even evaluating the trees in person. They were just taking photos in and sending reports back. Most of those have been kind of shut down and gone. So it did create a lot of ethics violations. So a lot of people got suspended for multiple years from writing reports. Some people got their certifications revoked, and etc. So these are just some quick overall impacts because I want to show you guys the new law. So Florida has seen an overall reduction in canopy. There's been an extreme increase in infrastructure across the state. Heat levels are always increasing. And then there's been a public and private reduced trust in arborists because, you know, are you in it for the money? Are you in it for preserving the trees? So that created a lot of reduced risk from the private side, you know, and then that gets transferred over to the municipal side because, you know, they just all group us together. And then we can skip over my personal experience because I want to leave some time for questions. So now in 2022, the Florida ISA chapter pushed for changes to be made to the law. So kind of like what somebody asked, track report does have a standard. So I'm just going to read this through real quick. And the new law, so this replaced the original law that we saw on the first slide. For purposes of this section, and the term documentation means an on-site assessment performed in accordance with the tree risk assessment procedures outlined in the best management practices, tree risk assessment, second edition, 2017, by an arborist certified by the International Society of Arboriculture or a Florida licensed landscape architect and signed by the certified arborist and licensed landscape architect. Residential property means a single family detached building located on a lot that is actively used for single family residential purposes, and that is either a conforming use or legally recognized non-conforming use in accordance with the local jurisdiction's applicable land development regulations. And that a local government may not require notice, application, approval, permit fee, or mitigation for the pruning, trimming, or removal of a tree on a residential property if the property owner possesses documentation from an arborist certified by the ISA or Florida licensed landscape architect that the tree possesses an unacceptable risk to persons or property. A tree poses an unacceptable risk if removal is the only means of practically mitigating its risk below moderate, as determined by the tree risk assessment procedures outlined in the best management practices. Tree risk assessment, second edition, 2017. And then a local government may not require a plant owner to or a property owner to replant a tree that was pruned, trimmed, or removed in accordance with this section. This section does not apply to the exercise of specifically delegated authority of mangrove protection. So again, mangroves have been left out. Private property trees have been better defined. Documentation has been defined. And if you guys read through that, you notice I did not say danger one time. So undefined terms were also removed from the law, which, you know, a clearer law leads to more protection for both property owners, municipalities, and the arborists themselves. And then if you guys have any questions, Alan asked if a letter is not signed by hand, is the letter incorrect? So, you know, you have two options. A lot of times, you know, you have digital signatures, which a lot of governments, lawyers, they accept. So you can, from what I've seen, digitally signed or signed in pen. If I'm looking at a report, I like to see it signed by hand. But I don't think we can really split hairs on if it's signed by hand or signed digitally through like DocuSign or Adobe or one of those places. If it's no signature at all, according to this law, we don't have to accept it anymore, because that's part of, I think in the BMP, I think it says a signature is required on track reports as well. So we've had that happen where people have sent in letters without signatures and we don't have to accept it.
Well, Stephen, thanks so much for your presentation. Appreciate it. As you're pulling up your contact information there, I'm going to sit in the chat right now. I dropped the ISA CEU form. So if you're seeking ISA CEUs, please fill out that form. And we still have time for questions here. Stephen, I saw one earlier on, and please put them in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. We can bring you off mute. I guess it wasn't a question, but it was more about that steep fine for the arborist. And saying he wasn't covered by insurance, and he surely wasn't paid that much on that consultant job. So I'm sorry if you said this, did he end up paying that?
So this case actually just settled about 3 or 4 months ago. So he's actually working with the city to set up a payment plan, because he does want to work back here. But it's kind of hard when you have that pending violation over your head. And it kind of worked out well because, the developer actually paid his half already. So it was kind of
he had a car wash that he was making money off of, it sounds like.
Yeah. So it kind of split it that way. So.
Okay. Josh asks, have you seen any court cases since that new law was passed?
So, with this new law being passed in 2022, a lot of people don't want to write their track report. If you guys have written track reports, they're about 6 or 7 pages. They take some time. So for a lot of people, it's like, well, I might as well just pay for the permit. It's faster. So I think we've seen an increase in permitting and a decrease in these kind of letters. And a lot of people, they try to learn from the book on how to write track reports, but they don't go and take the class. So that leaves a lot of, kind of like what Alan said, you end up with a lot of stuff missing, either signatures or sections of the report that are required. And, they're on the hook because they're not meeting, this new law here. So kind of to jump off that question too, Leslie, I haven't seen any landscape architects even get involved with all this stuff. I really think that's because, landscape architects have their own board as well, and not just like an ethics committee, but a board that can remove their licensure and their credentials. So I think that's, I think the risk was too great for them. So that's something I've just noticed.
So how, again, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat. How did this get to this point, to get to this improved law? Did the ISA chapter help?
So the Florida chapter, and these are all the articles and everything if you guys want to take a look at them. The Florida chapter actually went and lobbied. It took about 2 years. So as you guys saw, the original law passed in 2019. The new law with the changes didn't go into effect until 2022. So it was a combination of ISA supporters, educators, tree risk assessors. They went through and came up with this new verbiage. The original year in 2020, they just wanted to remove it, and it was basically shut down that, hey, this isn't getting removed. So they went back to the drawing board, and then in 2022 they came up with the new verbiage. So I know a lot of people here think, oh, why am I paying an extra $20 for my local chapter? The local chapters are really for when these kind of situations come up and you need that additional support, that we can't do it. You know, we don't have the means to go to Tallahassee and lobby for law changes and things like that, which I know we would all love to, but it's just, you know, we still have our day jobs too that we have to go and support. So when you guys see those local chapters, or like Leslie mentioned, organizations like UCFS, you know, that's what, you know, they kind of really help protect us from our normal level that we're at in our day-to-day municipality.
I think it's such a good point. And I worked for a nonprofit before this job, and you mentioned some of those advocacy groups in your area and across the state. And that's really the role they can help play, because when you cannot advocate in your official city duties unless you're taking the day off, you know, all that kind of stuff. You can try and make it work, but you really need those third parties to advocate for you and help improve things like this. So that's really good to see, because we have seen this happen in other states. Scott, you were mentioning in Arkansas some issues you're facing there. We'd really love to hear more about if this is happening to you. This is the role of a society, is to help push urban forestry forward. And if there's things that are preventing us from reaching our big tree goals, we really need to hear more about it. Be thinking about it from an advocacy and policy perspective. Well, Stephen, we have 2 minutes left. Is there anything final you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I thank you for having me come on. Yeah. It was great. I'm sorry I'm a little hoarse, but it's great. You know, just like most of us, we love talking trees. So it's great when you can see, I think there's 46 people on right now who all kind of have the same passion. Kind of like when we did MFI, it was kind of that same feeling, you know, you get to hang out with our people and share what we're passionate about. And it's, you know, it's good because you guys, I know, understand the struggles that we go through dealing with councils and laws and ordinances. So I'm happy I got to share my information with you guys. My emails are up there, both my personal and my work email. If you guys have any questions, any requests that I can help with, please feel free to email me. I love this kind of stuff. This is why I got into this. This is why I'm continually, like, I'm working on becoming an urban planner, because, you know, it's hard to get that seat at the table. And Leslie will talk about that. As an arborist, it's hard to get the seat. Yeah. So I'm working on, you know, making my seat at the table where I can, you know, represent trees in a long-term urban planning setting. Yeah. So if I can provide any insights, I'm here, I'm available.
You have perfect plug, Stephen, about MFI. Thanks. Make sure you plan to look for MFI being announced on August 1st. And yes, this society is here to get you a seat at the table because you are busy doing your job. So let's make sure that you have that seat at the table and your voice is heard, and make sure you feel confident in what you're doing every day. So with that, I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you, Stephen. This is being recorded and I will share afterwards, and we will look to see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Have a good one.